Thank you everyone for being here and welcome. This is round two. And if we can go ahead and advance. So this here is an overview of our agenda. Hopefully many of you, most of you received the email that had the agenda in it, and hopefully you were able to have access to either a digital copy or a hard copy. But we are here and we are starting just about on time, even with these technical difficulties. You can see the things that we have ahead for you. And again, my name is Ashley Robles. I'm working here with GSP as an interim plant ecologist, and I might be a new face to many of you, but I'm very happy to be here with you. And we can go ahead and move forward. Here is an example of the agenda we sent. So there is a place for some notes, and then I am going to be incorporating what we have some plant teachings, and so you may have seen those as well. And we really encourage you to follow along throughout the presentation or to take some time after and just really dig into these reflective questions. Go ahead and move forward. So now that our meeting has officially started, we of course would like to start with a land acknowledgement. We humbly recognize that we are gathered on Indigenous land, the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples, including the Duwamish, Squamish, and Muckleshoot. We thank these caretakers of this land who have lived and continue to live here since time immemorial. We acknowledge the role that traditional Western-centric planning practices have played in harming, displacing, and attempting to erase Native communities, and we respect Indigenous rights to sovereignty and self-determination. We commit to being better listeners and learners and to lifting Indigenous voices, while centering restorative land stewardship rather than unsustainable and extractive use of the land. We also commit to identifying and stopping racism and all forms of oppression. We'd also like to recognize that land acknowledgement is just but a tip of the iceberg of what needs to be truly acknowledged and done, and that there's a greater call to action, and that there's lots of resources that we can be digging into to better understand how we can be stewards, not just of the land, but to this promise. Lisa did just drop in the chat a link to what's called EcoTrust, which is a wonderful resource to help us all better understand how we can take this just from words into action. So we encourage you to please check that out. And we'll move forward. Thank you. Throughout the presentation, I will be incorporating plant teachings. We thought that this was just a wonderful way to think more deeply about our work and to be reflective. It's a way to consider and, again, to integrate. And I wanted to acknowledge that these plant teachings are coming from the Grub and Northwest Indian Treatment Center that has a plethora of resources, and we're just really grateful to be able to utilize these teachings in our work, and we really encourage you to explore them deeper, and we'll get a chance to do that this evening. Thank you, Lisa. We'll move forward. And so that brings us to our first plant teaching, which is Camas, and Camas teaches us about reciprocity. We care for the land, and the land cares for us. We care for our communities, and our communities are strengthened. A stronger community creates a more thriving environment, full of safer, happier residents. Volunteering your time and efforts not only brings greater benefits into your own life and surrounding environment, but benefits everyone, the whole community. With healthier forests, we have cleaner air, clearer water, we have greater and expanded access to healing benefits of natural areas. Canvas teaches us that we care for plants and plants care for us. We receive as we give back. And Canvas has us thinking about this question: why do I choose to volunteer in urban forests and natural areas? What is my commitment? So please take just a quick moment. You can jot down, think about that. And we'll move forward. So the first part of our presentation will be our wonderful manager, Lisa Seco, giving GSP partnership updates and giving us an overview of where we are in GSP. We'll move forward there. Before she starts, I'd love to incorporate one more plant, and that's oak. Oak teaches us patience. Oak trees are strong and steady and slow growing. Unlike other trees that sprint toward the sunlight, oaks take the long view, steadily creating deep roots, thick bark, hard wood, tough leaves, and nutritious nuts. These efforts help oak thrive in many habitats and survive harsh conditions. Oaks are the most common type of tree in the northern hemisphere, with some 600 species. Even though in the last 150 years, fire suppression, development, and logging has reduced the Gary Oak Prairie habitats to less than 3% of their historical presence. But scientists speculate that warming temperatures will cause oak woodlands to expand, and they will become a lifeline for many species. Patience is a skill that helps us to endure difficult situations and to make decisions that will help us achieve long-term goals. By being like the oak and sharing the knowledge, our nourishment, of our program's fruits, we can help others become stronger and spread these skills and methods to other communities in our region, in our nation, and at the world at large. Over the past 19 years, the Green Seattle Partnership has worked to create a thriving urban forest restoration program through community engagement. As we have grown and learned, we have been able to see this model expand. Through our patient and steadfast commitment to our goals and values, to not only restoring urban forests, but to creating a galvanized and informed community, we have seen efforts for urban forest restoration grow. Sometimes we can become impatient, thinking things are not happening fast enough. But when we focus on slow, steady growth, we observe a lasting effect. When we take time to patiently listen to the ideas of others, consider multiple opinions, and examine our own perspectives, we see the opportunity for a more sustainable approach. So Oak asks us to think, what is one thing you have learned since becoming a forest steward? And what is one hope you have for the growth of the Green Seattle Partnership as we look forward to the next 20, 50, 100 years? And with that, Lisa, thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to kind of end up turning this direction. I'm having some screen troubles, but I'm going to start us off today with an update on the Green Seattle Partnership. The headline, as Ashley shared, is that we are in year 19 of a program that we said was going to last for 20 years. So kind of an interesting spot to be in. But don't worry, it is not over. It's just a really important chance for us to spend some time reflecting and considering our path forward together. So for those who don't know me, my name is Lisa Seco, and I work as the ecology team manager here at Seattle Parks and Recreation. And I have spent the last 10 years as a plant ecologist. And prior to that, worked with several partner organizations, including at the University of Washington, doing research back in 2008 when this picture was taken. And like Rory and Joanna here, and many of you in this room, I think it's just indicative of kind of a long history that we have with the Green Saddle Partnership, and really a deep investment in this work that I also bring here. And it's also just, always interesting to kind of think about, what does 19 years mean? It's almost kind of teenager feeling in some ways. It's the photo, at least for me, feels like a very, very long time ago. And then again, not so long ago. So we're going to be talking a lot about kind of stretching our experience of time and our timeline of this program today. And it's part of why we have Amir with us today, who's going to talk about kind of the long history of the land and water of our region as well. And I think it's really important for us to take that time to kind of stretch a little bit and think. As Billy Frank Jr. said, it takes 500 years to plant a tree. We recently watched the Fish Forest documentary as a team, which I think Eric has it lined up to drop in the chat here. Just a really valuable presentation of and look at tribal treaty rights within our region and the need for co-management. And this piece about taking 500 years to plant a tree, for me, just really signals the change from the early Green Seattle Partnership, where, everything has been about, in year one, you do your weed removal. In year two, you plant your stuff, and then you spend, 3 or 5 years establishing those trees and plants. And then it would just take 20 years to do 2,500 acres of forested parkland restoration. But for everybody in this room, you recognize, I'm sure, that this is really generational work, that it's not something that's going to happen in 20 years. We reference the 20-year plan often. The image on the left is the original plan from 2005, and then the image on the right is our strategic plan from 2017. And I give these both a lot of credit. I think these primary goals here to restore and maintain the forested parklands in designated natural areas of Seattle, and to expand and galvanize an informed, involved, and active community around forest restoration and stewardship, like both of those still ring super true to the program, and I hope really ring super true to the work that each of you are doing in our forested parklands. And I think, again, this chance to kind of expand past this initial work is really critical. So part of what I'm going to do today is take the next several slides to give you the GSP 101, kind of where we have gone with these goals, and kind of lay out where the program is right now. And I think, nothing's drastically different, but I think it's a really nice chance, or I hope it's a nice chance for each of you to listen for some of those differences and similarities on how you message the program. For folks who are newer, this is really a great chance to dial in your understanding of kind of the who, what, where, and why of the Green Seattle Partnership. So run through that, and then reflect a little bit more on kind of where we're going with the program. So fundamentally, Green Seattle Partnership is a collaborative effort to restore and enhance the forested parklands of Seattle, like we all know. And we think this really helps with a number of things. One is improving human health through access to nature, hopefully each of your health and your community health. This work builds wildlife habitat and improves the health of our regional waters. We think it strengthens neighborhoods and builds cohesion, and really is a way of looking at increasing climate adaptation and resiliency in our city. And I would say that this work has been really transformative over 19 years. We are, at the end of last year, we had hit just over 2,000 acres in ongoing restoration work. So they're undergoing weed management and planting. We've had 1.37 million volunteer hours since the inception of the program. We've planted just under 1.5 million native plants, and 339,000 of those are native trees, really having a huge impact on our city's ability to manage things like excessive heat this week. And we are, one of my favorite facts actually is that we're nearing the 50,000th, that's almost a hard word to say, 50,000th tree freed from ivy and clematis vines. So we've been kind of watching the metrics come in through our dashboard associated with cedar. And in fact, I should probably check it tonight just to see if we've hit it already this last week. We also have 164 active forest stewards in 75 parks out leading community, just like each of you. And in 2023, we had 132 paid and stipended participants that were participating in really on-the-ground restoration and community building experiences. So I wanted to take the next couple slides to describe the partnership structure in some detail, because it really is a network of folks participating. I get emails frequently, maybe even once a week, from people looking for kind of a standalone nonprofit that is the Green Seattle Partnership. And as all of you know, that doesn't really exist. We do it in partnership. So we can break down this work into partner organizations, community participants, professional crews, and the city of Seattle. And I'll start here with the partner organizations. They play a really critical role in sparking community support through each of their unique missions. Their scopes focus on engagement through restoration activities, including paid job pathways programming, volunteer opportunities, educational opportunities, and other programming that's really driven and described by folks that they're supporting in their community. So we have 15 contracted partners this year alone. Oh, you're not seeing all the words. They're there. So we have 15 contracted partners this year, and they include the list of folks here on the screen right now. Some folks in the call will be really familiar with each of these organizations, and some of them might be new to you. I am not going to spend a lot of time talking through what each of them are doing, but just wanted to really flag their amazingness. And the staff associated with the bodies of work are just a really stellar group of people and individuals. I did want to call out specifically Forterra is still here as a partner on the list, but they've made a big choice in their organization. Older forest stewards who were brought on in the last couple decades recognized that Forterra played a really important role specifically with the Forest Steward Program. But as an organization, they decided a couple of years ago to step back from direct programming here in Seattle and some of the other cities that participate with the same partnership model, the Green Cities. We moved much of the support work to Cascadia, who's also listed here, in May, who represents and helps in so many different ways, actually, including on webinars and trainings. And then we pulled much of the Forest Steward Program support in-house. And so oftentimes you guys are out meeting with Eric, and he's really the face of that program at this point. So some big shifts, but also a ton of incredible work that each of the partners brings. The next line there is community participants. So we have people that come as individuals. We have folks that come to this work as like a group participants, and they can be both volunteers and paid participants. And again, that's kind of a shift in the way that we talk about the program. I think a lot of people think of it only and always as a volunteer program, but that part of the way that it has changed over time is to really make sure that we're offering paid opportunities as well. So Forest Stewards are, as you all know, a really critical part of this work, and are volunteers that lead restoration and lead their neighbors and community members at a dedicated site. So as you know, it's a leadership role within the program and is really moves forward what can be kind of pretty decentralized work. You're designing and implementing site restoration and working with each of your communities that you represent and live in. And, you know, I mentioned kind of our level of activity right now. I don't think my numbers matched up actually, but we're somewhere around 166 active folks in 75 parks. And I think it's also just really testament to the program that there's 75 forest stewards that have provided over 10 years of service. I wanted to call out specifically, it's not a super detailed slide, but just to call out kind of the job pathways programming that happens within this community participants. We've got youth organizations participating with events. We've got wage or stipended roles for high school age students. And then we also have a lot of partnership with core programs, Earth Corps and Dirt Corps being some, Washington Conservation Corps as well. And then we have internship opportunities as well as we're looking at kind of capacity building within some of the partner organizations and their staff as well. I would be really remiss not to recognize the efforts of the crews that are part of this work. They support some of the most intense work, this landslide in the East Duwamish Green Belt. Oh, you're not going to see that picture yet. Geez, I'm really messed up on my slides right now. In the next slide, you'll see a landslide photo, and I think it's an exact example of kind of the level of technical work that they're leading on. So they're doing a lot of large-scale projects. It includes the professional crews include our in-house natural area crew, and then several contracted crews that we work with an annual basis to really move forward larger acre projects. We also This program is very, very much supported and in coordination with the district staff for the Seattle Parks and Recreation, as well as our heavy equipment crew, trails program, and urban forestry. They really help us make the magic happen. So here's the list of contracted crews in that photo that I mentioned in the East Awamish Greenbelt. You can drive north on I-5 and see this site now and see a lot of that stuff, a lot of that material that was planted is thriving and helping stabilize that slope. I wanted to call out in particular our natural area crew with a special shout out. They are really living and breathing the restoration work on a daily basis. So if you find yourself these series of photos is from Lake Washington at Lakewood Marina. So if you find yourself there, please check out their work to help improve the health of this sanctuary site, this wildlife sanctuary site. So they put a lot of heart and work into this. So much appreciation to them. So then this part of the fourth leg of the Green Seattle Partnership is kind of some of the City of Seattle role. So we've got 3 plant ecologists that hold the program coordination at this point. Eric Ashley, who is actually wrapping up her role with GSP today in an interim capacity. And then Michael Helms, who replaced Michael Yadrick when he left this last year. Also in an interim role. So the 3 plant ecologists are then supported by a newer role, senior urban ecologist, Danielle DeVere, and then myself as the manager. And we're doing a ton of coordination in-house across the Parks and Recreation divisions and with other city departments. And again, I feel like this is, one of those places to flag just how much has shifted. And I'm going to share this team org chart, super boring, but at least a picture of kind of where we're at as a team. And also something to really celebrate that we have moved from being still scrappy, but from being a super small team to really a well-established program within the Parks Department. And that was named very squarely in our 2005 plan that we really needed to create space for this work. And now we have a whole ecology team. So we have Bridget Kelsch leading on wildlife and integrated pest management. Like I mentioned, Danielle stepped in, brings a background in riparian restoration and is moving forward ecological assessment, mapping, and strategic planning work for the program, and then really linking closely with our urban forestry team here at Parks as well. Michael Helms is in an interim role and leading all of our crew work. Eric, as you guys know, is supporting the Forest Steward Program and really leading on logistics across the program. And then Ashley has played a really important role supporting the partner organizations and improving on educational materials and communications over the last 6 months. And then, of course, the natural area crew as well. So quite a team, much to be proud of. We also don't do this in just the partnership. Of course, there's GSP is a much bigger umbrella. So we have regional work with the Green Cities Network. So the map of cities across the Puget Sound region there are all still, even kind of as Forterra has stepped back from direct service work, we're all still coordinating. And in fact, there'll be a training tomorrow hosted by City of Kirkland to check out some of their Green Kirkland partnership work on steep slopes. So still a really important way of connecting and sharing this model, partnership model across the region. We also participate nationally in a network called Forest in Cities, and it has been just really elevated our work on a national scale. We're engaging with folks on a really regular basis on research efforts and that have really provided additional funding. All of these reports that are shared here are in easily accessed through the link that Eric dropped here. And so you can kind of see how Seattle is reflected. It's been a really powerful way to learn more and also share out on our work. And then, of course, Seattle was recognized as a generation restoration role model city through the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, which is a huge international recognition. I think initially we were kind of like, cool, what does that actually mean? But there's been such an amazing chance to, again, connect with cities across the world, connect with the United Nations and program on the environment, and really elevate the work that each of you are doing here in Seattle. It is really celebrated internationally that we are able to engage with folks across the city on such a scale to offer the type of participation with forest restoration. It's unique, it turns out. And so I think something really for each of you to celebrate and appreciate tonight. And part of the way we do this is by having really secured funding over many years and secured the advocacy over many years. Built what, that second goal really focused on the need to galvanize and inform and activate community investment in these spaces. And I would say that we really have succeeded over 19 years in doing that. So presented here are both the urban forestry budget lines as well as Green Saddle Partnership and Natural Area Crew. You'll see a difference between 2023 actuals and 2024 budgeted. It's not like that we've actually seen an increase this last year. It's just that we spent less than we had in 2023. And I would like to also just call out just a really important opportunity within the Parks Department through Parks District Cycle 2 funding. We've added the Tree Crew Plus, which is the planting side of the house. So we've had an amazing tree crew for many years. And in order to really meet canopy goals, especially in developed parks, we've added a new crew through this funding source. And they've been able to really ramp up on tree planting in a way that has been pretty amazing to watch, and definitely an important part of kind of our collective work around urban forestry and canopy development. Through all of this work, through the partnership work, and through kind of this increased emphasis on urban forestry within our city, we were successful in applying for Forest Service funding through the Inflation Reduction Act a year ago in May. Last fall, I guess, is when we heard back. And there's a lot of elements to this 12.9 million grant that we're kicking off this year. But one really important piece is the return of the Youth Green Corps program, which is a really proven job training program model. A lot of the folks pictured here went into Parks and Recreation landscape career pathways. And so we're very excited from the Parks Department side of things to welcome back the Youth Green Corps with a cohort of program participants probably starting next year. This grant also builds a lot of capacity for urban forestry and forest restoration in Beacon Hill and Chinatown International District. And it supports collaboration across the city departments to build towards kind of a one Seattle urban forestry effort. And a lot of the investment in forest and natural areas are actually going to be, there's some work within Parks Department lands, but we actually are moving forward what a lot of forest stewards really pushed for in our last strategic planning effort, which is, how do we carry forward some of the effort onto other forested landscapes within the city? So we'll be supporting through this grant work forested land with Seattle Housing Authority as well as Seattle Public Schools, both in Beacon Hill. We've also really expanded our shoreline and creek work. I mentioned Danielle earlier. She's pictured here on the left, showcasing what has become a pretty giant issue along the Lake Washington shoreline, where we're seeing a lot of erosion behind this failing bulkhead. And so we actually received funding this year from King County RIA 8 to do some initial concept design and shoreline planning. But there has been an amazing amount of early action in terms of this stabilization work, where there's actually logs embedded in the shoreline there, as well as planting and weeding work that's happened. We've been in coordination with Seafair. You'll probably see a lot of fences up along the shoreline right now, and our fingers are very crossed in hopes that we can kind of keep the establishment moving through the Seafair and summer season. So a lot of collaboration to make this work happen, and a lot of new and kind of growing connection with work that Seattle Public Utilities has held previously on creek restoration. And we do all of this work with the international standards for ecological restoration in mind. So these are the 8 principles that Society for Ecological Restoration kind of has as the underpinnings of ecological restoration work. And I think it's really important for us to reflect, especially at this point in year 19, on how we're doing compared to this kind of set of standards. It's a young field in so many ways. And so these standards help us kind of, do that reflection work. So number 1, engages stakeholders. I think we are succeeding in that, as we've kind of showcased through the presentation. Number 2, and this is kind of where I want to go next, is draws on many types of knowledge. And I think there's a yes and no for Green Seattle Partnership here. Our decentralized model really does offer this chance for us to grow innovation in a really unique way, that each of you are out every day considering kind of a best strategy for your site, and are doing really adaptive management, and are, if we look at the Forest Steward Field Guides as an example, and that original version compared to where it is now, that is really reflective of kind of a growing knowledge that each of our types of knowledge has contributed to. But I will say that I think that, where we have fell off and where we have not stepped up enough is in really building a closer relationship with tribal nations. And one of the things that Seattle Parks and Recreation has done in response to the first ever Seattle Tribal Nations Summit in 2023, we had a follow-up gathering, and Eric will provide the summary report here. But this was a really important and formal way for us to understand more closely where there are important opportunities to make improvements. And so we identified needs for improving on actual consultation, both capital C consultation that happens through permitting processes, as well as relationship building and advisory roles through kind of lowercase consultation. And that really relationship building and resourcing regional tribes to contribute is a really critical part for us to do this work well. We have, as a ecology team staff, also really committed to doing some in-house learning, and I want to offer this link to each of you as maybe an important next step for each of you. 20 hours of learning through Indian Country 101. This is prepared in coordination between the Nature Conservancy and the Whitner Group, and really an amazing resource specific to Washington State that I would encourage each of you to spend some time on to again help us consider other ways of knowing this work, to move kind of away from our often our emphasis on Western science as kind of a primary, oops, sorry, slides are moving around, a primary and what's the right word, kind of respected way of doing work. And I would just like to actually commend David Parasso, a fellow forest steward here, for hosting park staff and some of the community organizations at his site at Martha Washington to really do just that, to learn together, to sit in circle and build relationships and talk about what that opportunity looks like to practice a different type of restoration where potentially harvest and tending is centered and respected in the work that we do, and really a starting conversation for the practice, the culture, the policy that supports that. And for me, this is really the heart of the partnership work. This is one example of collaboration. This is a 2023 field committee meeting deep in the depths of the West Duwamish Greenbelt. And this is us out there, right? Standing together, talking through questions and learning from each other and perspective. You know, we, as a kind of pseudo organization, have a lot of need and opportunity to generate new solutions. And we also have to be comfortable in these spaces and learn from each other and kind of holding what ends up being a lot of competing needs within each of our park spaces. So in 2025, we will be moving forward strategic planning work that helps us move past that initial 20-year plan. And there's a lot of opportunities there to refine our priorities together and move forward some new messaging and approach. I don't know if anybody recognizes this picture. So this is kind of a silly end to my presentation, but we can see change in our very short timeline. And it's very worthy of celebrating as well. Eric was at Lewis Park a couple weeks back, month ago or so. I saw Peter was on this call and he ran into this old friend here. So this is Dougie, the Douglas fir pictured at Green Saddle Day in 2017, right before it was planted. And it's memorialized with a rock placard, which means that we know where it is. But this is one of those trees that brought a lot of people and a lot of kids joy. And now it's this giant Douglas fir in the middle of a space that really needs new trees, a lot of unhealthy big leaf maple in this park. And so to see it succeeding is, I don't know, pretty charming. And, you know, again, we can see our impact and see the opportunity in a lot of our sites. So, you know, keep growing. This is a couple other shots of our forest stewards really out there making it happen. Thank you so much for all that you do. And with that, I will pass it back to Ashley.
I did want to say this reminds us, thank you, Lisa. The plants that really come to mind as you give your presentation are the Doug fir, which talks about adaptation and the ways in which adaptation creates resiliency. And because it's found ways to adapt and become resilient, it is a strong resource within our region. Let's move forward, please. And then it brings us to salmonberry and this idea of interconnectedness, this web of interconnected relationships. And through this web of interconnected relationships, we get the pollination that we need. We end up with the abundance of the berries that welcomes in just so much wealth into the habitat and resource for all the creatures within that habitat. And just it helps us to reflect, like, what is our own interconnected web of relationships? Again, I don't want to take too much more time. I really encourage you to read through it, think about these questions, and I'm going to pass it over to Eric to talk about the Forest Steward Program.
All right. Thanks a lot for everyone being here this evening. I can't wait to see you all out in the forest. And thank you all for all your dedication to our urban forests. I really try to make sure to acknowledge that I am paid to be out there with you and you all are giving your time. So we truly are very fortunate to have so many of you that are so dedicated and out there, constantly hosting, leading, engaging with community. And Lisa hit on some of these things, but really, the program has really changed a lot over the years. And the decentralized nature of it is what makes it so wonderful. It also makes it's really important that we always are in communication, and you know how to get a hold of me. It's important that we meet and that we have an active work plan. And it's really important that we need to share a common understanding of the program and what our messaging is for everybody that's connected to the Green Seattle Partnership, right? And also the expectations that we hope that you understand. And I think that this presentation will help kind of refresh your minds that some of you have been doing this a long time and some of you are still fairly new. And also for me, trying to create efficiencies to make space for new forest stewards. We haven't onboarded forest stewards for a few years, and we will be onboarding forest stewards this year. And so this 3 training series, annual meetings, will help understand how many forest stewards are really active and help me understand how much I can continue to support you all and bring on more forest stewards. Next slide, Lisa. All right, so again, the forest steward description and position, right? So is that you have attended an orientation, you serve as a key contact assigned to your park or parks. Some of you are really out there doing lots of amazing work and are in multiple parks. You're coordinating at least 4 events per year. And when we say an event, it's an event that you put on Cedar, and ideally it's public for all to come and enjoy. But it doesn't have to be large. It can be, what an event is, you and somebody else coming out to the park. You're managing those postings, your sign-in sheets, reporting through Cedar, and all of you are familiar with this information. And I already mentioned the biennial site visit. Please, if you haven't, or you please, let's coordinate soon so we can get out into the park. I really look forward to getting out with all of you when I can, attending 1 training per year. So congratulations, you've all got that right tonight. And please always follow best management practices. And importantly is the ability and willingness to maintain a positive working relationship with everybody, attendees, me, the districts, community members, park users, etc. So next slide, Lisa. So maybe you've never seen this before, maybe this is new to you, and I believe Lisa is going to be putting some of these in the chat. And this information also will be followed up after all of the training series are finished. But this is the department's code of conduct for all Seattle Parks and Recreation volunteers. And I don't need to read everything on here, but at the same time, these are very important to understand the behaviors and expectations of the volunteers, right? So you are all an extension of a city employee when you're out there. You have your volunteer vest on, and you must treat the public and park users with respect. And sometimes as a public servant or as a volunteer forest steward, and have that lead role, it's important sometimes to be really diplomatic, and I'm here for you. So if something happens in the park, please reach out to me. And it can be challenging when there's situations that arise, but at the same time, it's important to just try to remain calm and to remain positive. And clearly there's no harassing behavior to other volunteers or attendees, no use of any alcohol, and safety. I am nicknamed Mr. Safety in my household and my family, and I send out emails about safety, about wind, tree hangers. Just overall safety is important for everybody anytime you're out volunteering in the park. And recognizing that all users have rights to the parks, right? These are open spaces, and we're not closing the park. And I understand that there's going to be conflicts with park users, and I don't need to go into all those different things that you all experience more than me that out there in the park. But please take some time to review this, and thanks for putting that in the chat. Next slide, please. Okay, so these are additional non-negotiables that I hope is not new to all of you, and it shouldn't, because we talk about this in many aspects of our messaging, either in our newsletter or in the monthly mulch, but really important to take in consideration everybody that's coming to your events. I'm Eric Sterner. I use he, him pronouns. It sets a very welcoming stage to attendees because not everybody necessarily self-identifies that way. And when you lead your event that way, it just automatically quickly just brings everybody in, right? And so it's important to also consider just language awareness and how we're referring to our work. And we've had great blog posts about this. I have shared information about this in the monthly mulch. It's really important to just, when you're referring to a plant or referring to a weed or a plant out of place, or I encourage you all to take some time to jump into that a little bit and just to kind of lean into changing the way that we refer to each other and refer to the land that we're tending. And then conflict resolution skill building. I think it's important that, we're all learning, we're all evolving, and it can be challenging with any aspects of our lives, be it if you're retired or family members or volunteers, but it's all about being in good relationship, right? We're all here to help these forests, these plants, these forested areas, and we really want to be in good relationship with it. Lisa, next slide, please. All right, Mr. Safety, be safe. New first aid kits, I have them. If you need them, materials in those, you may have never used your first aid kit. So in the in-person meetings, we have first aid kits, so I will be able to get you first aid kits. We're going to have links for these, the incident and accidents. I hope that you all don't have to use them, but we're going to cover that. And please read my weather alert emails and be in communication. I love hearing from all of you. Read my monthly mulch and sign up for the newsletter and tune into our social medias. And obviously not surprising to use cedar, and we're going to cover that here in a few slides. And also the youth waiver forms, which is also going to be a link to that as well. Next slide, please. So here we are, volunteer vests. I have plenty of volunteer vests. So I got all kinds of sizes, and we have all kinds of first aid kits. So I encourage you to look in your first aid kit. Some of it still could be good. Obviously, you're all used to your own Band-Aids in your house. Sometimes they deteriorate. And some of the materials in there is still plenty good, like the ointments and such. So please reach out if you need volunteer vests and if you need a new first aid kit. Next slide, please. So here's the incident and accident reports. Links will be to these. These are also on our website. I hope that you all don't have to use these, but it's reality that something could occur. So please have these available. And if you have any questions about what form to use, there's great information on our website related to these forms. But it's really important to have copies of these and to understand when to use an incident report or when to use an accident report. And obviously it's pretty self-explanatory. I don't get a lot of them, but things do happen. And so like a first aid kit, it's important to be prepared to have these on hand. Next slide, please. All right, so the new sign-in sheet. This was a new last year. All of you should have this in your job box. And we laminated a bunch of them. So like the vest and like the first aid kit, you need to have this there in addition to the sign-in sheet. So if you don't already have it and you need a copy of it, I laminated a bunch and we can get them to you. You can also print it out and have it. It should be there when somebody shows up, so they've had the opportunity to read it. They already read it when they registered online. When they come and sign in, they also have had the opportunity to read it again. It's all about that waiver language, and we're all used to that, right? When we're filling some paperwork out and you have to click, yes, I agree to this information. It's important with the updates to the sign-in sheet process that you all have this at every event you're hosting. Next slide, please. So the youth waiver form, I've been getting a lot of these lately with, this is when a youth is in attendance without a chaperone, be it a school, any kind of group they're with. when they're under 18 and they're being left at your event, they need to have mailed this, emailed this in, and they'll have a physical copy. So it's unfortunately we cannot do a digital option, but they can email that. They can take a picture of that and email it to me. Yeah. So also I have copies of this to have next to your sign-in sheet instructions in waiver language. And if you would like one of these, I made a bunch of laminated QR codes. You also get this link in the information coming out, in links in the chat. Next slide, please. All right. So watch for professional crew support, which Lisa talked about earlier on with the contractors and in-house natural area crew. Look in the monthly mulch for requests and deadlines. We're long past that at this point in the year. You will be receiving it when a park's going to receive work, a site visit prescription like this picture here, and that would be coming from an ecologist with me on it. And ideally those are in adjacent areas. And there's going to be a link about there's a link for crew resources there. But ultimately, if some work is happening in a park, ideally you're hearing about it before boots hit the ground, and we try our best to make sure you're aware of that, and we try to keep Forest Steward active sites. And you've heard me probably talk about this. If we hire a contractor to work in a park, ideally we really have a very clean separation. We don't have overlap of crew work and Forest Steward work, and that's for obvious reasons, where they show up and they're needing to use chainsaws or to be more technical on site, and we don't like to have overlap. But if it's a woody treatment, then obviously you all are welcoming that. So it just depends what it is. Next slide, please. All right, so coming soon, we're going to add some exciting new tools to help kind of understand how we're doing out there, and for everything related. So this is not just related to the Forest Steward program, it'd be related to a partner organization as well, and this accountability button, and also a satisfaction survey. So more to come on that. We're in the back end. Ashley and Danielle and myself and a few other people have provided input. And we also have translated materials in 8 languages. So if anybody is interested in any translated materials, please let me know, and we're happy to get some to you. And next slide. All right, I mentioned this already. We are going to be running a Forest Steward orientation with Forterra stepping back in the pandemic and staffing challenges. It's been a few years and it's long overdue. So we're thinking differently about this process in a way that we're hoping to run a training series that allows folks that maybe can't make the commitment to become a Forest Steward like all of you, but want the core training. And then folks that say, yeah, I want to make the commitment to host 4 events a year and make that 1-year commitment, then we will run an application process to hopefully get a great new cohort of amazing Forest Stewards like all of you. So that is in the works. That's coming end of this year, beginning of next year. I've heard from a lot of you. I think a couple of you are actually regulars on this, regular non-Forest Stewards. I think that I saw a few of you that are here today. So thank you so much for your patience, and more to come. And next slide. All right, I'll pass it back to Ashley.
Thank you, Eric. Here we're looking at alder, and alder is teaching us to build community. Alder groves grow in waterways and wetlands. We see many of those here in Seattle. Alders grow close together and in tight groves. As city dwellers, we too can understand this type of proximity to our neighbors. Alder groves create fertile soil through partnerships with fungi and bacteria. As alder grow, they provide shade for other plants and aquatic life. Alders provide rich food sources for both birds and mammals. Additionally, the seeds of other longer living conifers like cedar, hemlock, and spruce are welcome and thrive in alder groves and will go on to outlive the alder. Alders understand the benefits of diversity and make way for a thriving environment. Creating harmony, they aim to think long-term by inviting others. Understand understanding that it is the differences among individuals and a variation of knowledge and skills that contribute to a more well-rounded collective and a community that depends on each other. So Alder really asks us, how can I connect with differing parts of my community? How can we benefit from our differences? Let's move to the next slide, please. Up next, we have a very exciting presentation on our water lines. This is just a beautiful overview of the history of the land. It's super inspiring, and it leads us then to Cedar. It has us thinking of kindness and generosity. Cedar teaches kindness and generosity through its many gifts and uses that contribute to the health of the community. Cedars can live to be over 1,000 years old and provide homes for many types of birds and animals. Cedars help support young saplings through root connections and mycelial fungal networks. Working together in a gentle way, they share resources. Cedars teach us the power of multi-generation or young, planning for future generations to have prosperous resources. And again, just asking us, how can we invite more youth into our programming? How can the Healthy Forest serve as a place for community and enjoyment outside of even restoration activities? And we invite you to think creatively about your own restoration spaces and ways that you can make them inviting community spaces. With that, I would love to turn it over to Amir. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this project called the Waterlines Project. The Waterlines Project, in its most simplest basic explanation, aims to contextualize our relationship between history and place to better inform contemporary environmental decision making, urban development, and our collective sense of stewardship. This has been carried out through many different ways of providing windows into our landscape and urban history. And these exercises is in storytelling with the shape of time, integrate many different types of research, bringing together environmental sciences, cultural history, as well as archival sources, and a lot of things around mapping. And trying to put this out there in different ways, different types of public interpretation, using different types of artistic and design practices, as well as informed imaginings. So we've done this in a few different ways. The thing you're probably most familiar with, if you're familiar with the project, is this map called it's the Waterlines Project map. I'll talk a little bit about that in more detailed very shortly, because it's in print and circulates. Also, we've done consulted with different types of interpretive science around town, done physical exhibits, done different types of visualizations, and also worked with artists to do site-specific art installation collaborations to bring forth histories in specific spots. And I'm going to talk a little bit about each of these things a little bit later. Quick overview with the Waterlines map is basically, it is a map of Seattle pre-Euro-American settlement sometime in the mid-1800s. What you see is it's oriented with what we traditionally see as east on the top of the map. It's very different than the ubiquitous image of map of Seattle that we carry with us. And this is because it's oriented how water generally flows through the landscape, coming from the Cascades down to the Salish Sea, down to the saltwater at the bottom of the map, which also coincides with indigenous modes of transportation and wayfinding. We have place names in southern Lushootseed keyed out on the map in the blue icons, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit later. We also have sort of general land cover, historical general land cover with dominant species assemblages, as well as culturally important plants. I'm going to talk a little bit about how we come to know these land covers a little bit later as well. And the only thing contemporary we have on this map is this. If you see a faint white line, that is the modern shoreline. So this is the Duwamish River. Historically, as many of you probably know, this was a sinuous, wide, meandering river, and it's been channelized. Just to give you more detail of the map compared to a contemporary aerial photo of the Duwamish Valley. Lots happened in a very short period of time. So how do we know? How do we know this information? How do we know about historical landscapes? This project is bringing together different, as I mentioned, different methods, different disciplinary knowledges, such as place names and oral traditions, geological sciences, community-based archaeology, archival studies, such methods that more historians use, as well as historical ecological mapping. And each type of these sources and methods bring together a particular type of information at various scales and in context in storing the land. I'm going to talk and do a little bit deep dive into the historical ecological mapping. At the end of the last century, in the late 1990s, when salmon, this 5 species of salmon was listed in the Endangered Species Act, I got brought into a project spearheaded by Brian Collins, who was a retired research scientist at the University of Washington. It was called the Puget Sound River History Project. And this was all brought on by knowing where historical salmon habitat was, aquatic habitat, what processes maintained them, and how that can inform contemporary restoration and ecological management decision making. Originally started with a pilot study up in the Skagit Valley, funded by the Skagit Co-op, which is a consortium of natural resource arms of tribes up there. And we came up with a methodology to look at historical maps, different types of maps that were surveyed different features, and bringing them together with and cross-referencing them and bringing in different types of features that were depicted in the maps, along with modern and contemporary environmental data like high-resolution digital elevation models, topography, and soils, and aerial photography. So I'm going to do a deep dive into one of these sources, the General Land Office plat maps. These were maps, first a systematic surveying system that was put into effect west of the original 13 colonies, except for Texas. And they laid out the township range system, which you still see today and is actually, inscribed onto our landscape. They were given instructions to document the land. They walked square miles, these sections. Each of these sections are a mile on its side. And most of the area in the Puget Sound lowland were surveyed between 1850 and 1880. As I mentioned, they actually were given specific instructions of what to document, and they wrote notes on those. They took notes while they were surveying and plotted up these maps from the notes. And to give you an example, this is on notes from 1861. You can really get to know each of the individual surveyors by their handwriting if you go and want to do your own research on this. And just for clarity, this next slide, this middle section is transcribed version of the notes, so you can read for better legibility. And then what you see on the left side is the map that was drawn up from these notes. And they measured things in distance, chains, and links, which I won't go into at the moment. But they were capturing quite a lot of information. They were capturing widths of channels and ponds. At times, they were noting depths of wetlands that they were crossing. And you knew what time of year they were there, so you could also get idea of seasonality of inundation. As part of their surveying process, they had to also note certain types of trees, and noted species and diameters of trees. They also noted general characteristics of soils and understory plants and general types of landscape characteristics that they also noted. So you can take this information and you can actually plot this up. And this is taking those notes. This is up in the Snohomish Valley. Sorry, this isn't labeled, but this is Everett right here, and this is the Tulalip Reservation. And so you can plot this information. You can get things like different types of species distribution. You can get species density of trees. You can take the line notes and get additional types of information. You can combine all of this types of information along, and this is just taking information from the General Land Office. I'm going to go back a few slides. You can also combine this with these other types of sources of information and other types of maps and other types of environmental data, and you reconstruct historical wetlands of the Snohomish estuary here. Just in a quick aside, when we first started working this project, these were not readily available on the web. A lot of these historical maps were actually scanning for the first time, or we had to fish around in archives, spend a lot of time in basements of libraries. But it's amazing now that most of these are available online now. Yes, you can reconstruct conditions, and just for example, here's some reconstructed conditions of wetlands in the Duwamish Valley and some of the different map sources were used. So it's important to note that even though they were using a lot of these historical maps to reconstruct these conditions. These mapping sources were literally part and parcel of the settler colonial process, and particularly the General Land Office. They were part and parcel of different acts to allocate land to settlers, largely white males. And these mapping exercises, especially in the Puget Sound lowlands, literally coincided at the same time that the treaties were being signed in this area. So this is the only text heavy, and it's not that heavy, hopefully, but maps, to say is maps exert a social influence through their emissions as much as the features they picked and emphasize. So mapping itself is the agent of change, imposing a certain worldview onto another. And most of these map sources were set up for privatization of land, extraction of resource, uses for specific logics that are ultimately part and parcel of indigenous disposition and displacement. And they were made to make specific types of decision-making tools. They're essentially ultimately have a lot of power, right? A lot of decisions were made from them. Just to show you this, there's a timeline of changes. There's a slide that my colleague Brian Collins made, timelines of changes to Puget Sound rivers, and juxtaposed to the different types of mapping sources that we use to document the changes. But a lot of these mapping sources were actually used to enact decision-making for these specific changes that were happening. Army Corps of Engineering records were there partly to de-snag rivers. for one example. And you don't need to know this, but just this is just to give you an idea of different types of historical maps that are used for creating the waterlines map of the Seattle area. So it is ironic that that these historical maps that were part and parcel of the settler colonial process has also helped us to reconstruct what things were like in indigenous landscape. And that can also help us inform our contemporary decision making. And another application of this is, I like to say, is hydrology remembers. A place that was historically wet will get wet again, given the right circumstances. And that's playing out, for instance, in the Duwamish Valley, where a lot of the places that are most prone to risk at flooding and sea level rise are places that were historically wetlands. Another aspect of this is because of the industrial legacy of the Duwamish Valley, as many of you know, it's also a Superfund site, and some of the early priority Superfund cleanup sites, there have been monitoring going on for a number of years, and it looks like there's also people are very interested in looking at contaminant mobilization and through the groundwater. And a lot of this groundwater and mobilization is happening in places where the channel used to run historically, or there was a wetland. So again, hydrology remembers. Just to take a zoom into, this is South Park and down in the Duwamish Valley. This darker green was a historical wetland. And this slide to the right of it, with the area red is areas that are most prone to flooding and sea level rise, coinciding with the historical wetland. And if you look at the history of the development of South Park, this wetland area was subsequently filled in later. The original primary residential area was developed first, just south of the wetland, before it was filled in. And consequently also has different types of drainage setups for combined drainage space versus separated, which also play into flooding issues. And aside here, you can also see the development patterns, how they played out in terms of impervious surfaces versus non-impervious. And you can see the initial neighborhood development is more forested because of street trees as well. So you can piece together different types of, due to the historical landscape conditions, the forms of eras of development have played out in a certain way, and has also led to specific types of how things express themselves in the contemporary landscape. So we're talking a lot of maps. I mean, we're talking. we're just a very mappy presentation, but one thing that all maps have in common, and that we're looking at, is lines demarcating boundaries. And so, question is, what is an actual line? If you look at some of these historical sources that we're using, they have different instructions of actually demarcating the separation between, for example, land and water. For the General Land Office, when they were measuring channels, they marked the full bank width. The Coast and Geodetic Survey, when measuring mean low water, first of all, intertidal areas, demarcating the intertidal areas. First of all, mean low water is already, as many know, an average reading, but it's also tied in to a datum that's a reference that someone somewhat arbitrary set. So my question to bring back is, like, how would a molecule of water draw this line? Would it be a line? How would you represent this? Or how would a salmon or a tree draw a line. Because we're making decisions based on these lines of how to manage our landscape, how to steward our landscape, how to make our landscape legible in a certain way for how we're thinking about it for the future. There's a landscape designer, Dilip Dekuna, who has this concept design with wetness, where he looks at the landscape as a continuum of either less wet to more wet, where he posits wetness is everywhere. And wetness in some form inhabits or falls everywhere. And then this is paraphrasing him, but flooding is water crossing a line that we drew. So yeah, this is a social media post from the Snoqualmie Tribal Ancestors Land Movements from a few months ago. And just pointing out that, Indigenous points of view is that we are made with the land and not separate from it. And what would it look like to live in a connected floodplain that provides diversity of habitat for all? So how can we better represent and map these complex relationships between land, water, people, and other species? This is, I think, a challenge. I don't have answers for this. This is a challenge that we need to all think about. And in a way, the Waterlines map and a lot of the things that I'd like to frame it as, it's like, how can we also use storytelling methods utilizing multiple ways of knowing and various ways of presenting complex experiences and relationships to place that can lead to increased intersectional awareness and dialogue that can ultimately create more equitable and just governments for everyone, which everyone includes people, land, water, and other species. So I'm going to talk a little, pivot on that and talk a little bit about the place names that are on the Southern Lushootseed place names on the land. We're working with Tammy Hone, who, along with Nancy Jo Bob, who are leading the efforts in Southern Lushootseed language revitalization. Tammy now teaches at Southern Lushootseed at UW. Place names are stories, proof of presence, archives of meaning, evidence of ancestry, and reference to treaties and other legal connections to land. Place names describe relationships to land, water, plants, animals, and the sacred. So I'm gonna be simplifying this, but in a shorter summary than usual. But basically, Tammy and Nancy are working on drawing on work that was done by Vi Hilbert along with other collaborators and elders that Vi Hilbert worked with, and the work of an ethnographer, T.T. Waterman, from the early 1900s. Nancy and Tammy are using family oral histories along with various archival documents, including ones where their ancestors shared knowledge to some of these early ethnographers. And Nancy says that place names are used to teach about traditional history of our Duwamish people and our other local tribes. Each name is a way to help preserve the teachings of each place and create awareness and build connections for all people. And of course, the landscape that we are reconstructing, quote unquote, on these various exercises were a pretty stewarded landscape. People were doing many different types of stewarding and management practices. Okay, I'm gonna now give a really brief history overview of a little bit of the environmental history of the region. It's going to be simplified, but if you're interested, there's several books that have been written about it, which many of you are probably familiar with. Some of this historical mapping work has supported some of these book projects, most of them. So if you are not already aware of some of these sources, I encourage you to go look them up. So One of the things I do want to emphasize about this project is that we're also really interested in some of the larger scale geophysical processes that shape the land you see today, such as glaciation, volcanic activity, and seismic activity. People were here. There are explicit references to geologic events in regional oral tradition. Excuse me. Coast Salish people had knowledge, understandings of these processes. And also how the landscape was very, very dynamic, as many of you know, many at the height of the last glaciation, 17,000 years ago, we're under 3,000 feet of ice, and it set the physical template of the landscape that we all walk around and steward today. And to also get at some of the more dynamism, one dynamic aspect of the landscape history is when the last glacier retreated, so a lot of the north-south valleys of this area were actually carved out, like the Green Duwamish Valley, as well as the Snoqualmie, were carved out from subglacial meltwater channels. And then the river found itself into it after the valley was carved out by these meltwater channels. And then for the Duwamish Green specifically, after the last glacier retreated, it actually was in an arm of the Salish Sea, of the Puget Sound. It was a connected body of water, and there are stories about this. And there's an animation I have that I can also, it's called 20,000 Years in Puget Sound. If someone can put that into the chat, that would be great. It's on YouTube. That shows this, but the Green Duwamish Valley started filling in from big Lahar event, a mud flow called the Osceola mud flow 5,600 years ago, and then subsequent other mud flows and sedimentation from those deposits started slowly filling in the valley, and it got the river valley delta got to where Tukwila is today just 2,200 years ago. It got to where it is now just over 1,200 years ago. So it's a very relatively dynamic and young landscape. Fast forward a bunch of years. Again, I'm glossing over and just giving you the highlights and some aspects to show how dynamic things are. As many of you know, the historical Lake Washington used to historically flow out the southern end of Lake Washington through the Black River into what is now the Duwamish River. And due to the ship canal going in, it rerouted the flow out the Ballard Locks into the saltwater, which completely reconfigured the hydrology of the system. It lowered Lake Washington by also 9 feet and dried up the Black River. Again, I'm glossing over this just for time, and you can take deeper dives through many different resources that are available. Same time, tidelands were filled in as the Duwamish. This is what's in beige is the intertidal. And Harbor Island was the largest human-made island at its time. And the only remaining portion of the Duwamish estuary is Kellogg Island, this little green piece of land that got cleaved by the channelization of the Duwamish River. Here's an aerial view of it. And as a lot of you know, hills have been toppled, and these are ubiquitous picture of the spite mounds of Denny Hill regrade. We see the hill here present, and now you don't below it, right in this image. Dramatic changes. as well as rivers disappearing, as I mentioned, the putting in the ship canal, rerouting the hydrology of the lake of the water into out to the sound through the battered locks, eventually dried up the Black River, which runs through Renton. There's a road on behind this Fred Meyer here that is literally built on the old river channel, a portion of it. And if you know what to look for, you drive right by the old river bank. It still is there, and it needs to be memorialized in some way. And I love this photo. It's a very powerful photo in the way that there's a lot going on here. It's this moment of transformation of the river, where newly channelized river with the meanders still present. You have a very young harbor island, and up in the upper right corner, you have a very lonely Smith Tower. And the major takeaways about this is the rerouting, building the ship canal, and also rerouting the White River down to the Puyallup, which I didn't talk about, cleave the whole overall watershed area by 60%, which is a major deal. Dramatic. And so why was this happening? This was happening for flood control, for increasing efficiency of commerce and navigation. But also there was a bit of real estate speculation going on. There's this real estate poster from 1907, and there's this incredible poem, "When in doubt, buy tidelands. Tidelands spell fortunes. Fortunes lie hidden in the mud. Buy tidelands in Seattle and gain the beginnings of a fortune." I see that I'm looking at my time, so I think we're running a little bit late, and I want to stick to the time, and I think I have maybe 5 minutes left, so I might skip ahead.
Well, I was going to just jump in and offer some extra time because we all want to just keep listening to you. And I think that we can do our wrap up with the time that we have. So would you like to does it make sense to continue till 8:20?
I can if you want
Everybody's
me to.
cheering in the background. I can
people
hear them.
want
Yes!
to, no, if people want me to, if they want to listen to me.
Yes, please. Let's continue that way. Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you.
So 8:20, right? Okay. Thank you, Lisa. Again, this is not unique to Seattle. This type of land reclamation and filling has happened across the globe in different contexts and time. And these are consequently also places, a lot of them are most prone to things like flooding as well as sea level rise. And they've had major consequences here. Completely decimated our aquatic ecosystem. It further reduced indigenous treaty rights to hunt, fish, gather, sustain livelihoods. However, it also reduced significant flooding risks for the Duwamish River Valley, which enabled the area to become Seattle's industrial commercial heartland. But as many of you know today, the Duwamish River in South Seattle is a Superfund site due to this legacy of industrialization, as well as redlining practices. South Seattle is home to the majority of Seattle's communities of color and lower income residents, with some of the largest health disparities in the city, as well as most risks to sea level rise and other flooding related risks because of the vastness of impervious surfaces too. So I'm going to pivot here again and talk a little bit about how we've give some examples of how we've put this information out there with different types of collaborations with different people in different contexts. We, along with Francis Nelson Artis and Zach Coram, did a project to reveal an old bend of the Duwamish River in the South Seattle College Georgetown campus, which is outlined in yellow. The river literally ran right through it. As many of you maybe also know, like the street grid in Georgetown was laid out around the old meander, which still persists to this day. We used this old Army Corps of Engineers map that had soundings or water depths of the river channel noted on it. And we took that information and we essentially made a surface, extruded it, inverted it above ground, and made contours of represented the river depths, but above in inverse. So what you see on this lower left is contours of the river in feet of the depths that it was at that area at that site, and hung cloth banners from a netting to represent the river. So if that makes sense, sorry, I'm stumbling over my words here, but the links of the banners represented the depths of the river channel at that point. And this is how it turned out in this Francis Nelson there. And it's a great way of playing with data-driven types of visualization and representation using the depths of the river, but also really could embody the river. When the wind would go through this installation, they would kind of ripple like currents, and you can actually go and explore the old river in a certain way. This is a collaboration. Actually, this was Michaela Woodward's own project. She used to be an oral historian, oral history manager and exhibit developer for the Wing Luke Museum, but now I believe she just started a job at Mohai. And she came this type, whereas the previous collaboration, there was more of a mind meld of working together to come up with that. This collaboration with Michaela went, but this was her project, and I helped with providing some of the historical information. Just to clarify, I'm just trying to clarify this, that there's different types of collaborations, and these things happen in different ways and very organically, and depending on how capacities and what makes best sense. But this was to just draw a simple representation of historical shoreline of Lake Washington before it was lowered, and just a simple chalk line. And Michaela had friends stationed at different parts of the line, and people would start walking in and run into these people who had information and pamphlets of information about the lowering of Lake Washington. This was during the 100-year commemoration of putting in the ship canal and lowering, and consequently the Lake Washington lowering. This was a part of an exhibit in a space funded by WashDOT for mitigation for the viaduct removal and tunnel project called Milepost 31, and we were tasked to do this exhibit called Moving Land. And so, as you walk through this specific exhibit, large columns containing these soil layers that you see right here, from actual geotechnical drillings, and we've used actual real soil from the spots that the cores coming out from on the map. So you walk into this space, and there's this aerial photo of a map with historical layers depicted on it, and so you walk in, and these columns envelop you in this space, and this is significant in a place like Pioneer Square, where there was a historical lagoon, which was essentially filled in originally from sawdust from Yesler's mill, the first sawmill of Seattle. And that layer of sawdust still is there, down there, especially in the northern half of what used to be the the lagoon. I go down and there's a little bit of fill, and then there's like a foot of sawdust, and then there's several feet of peat, which was historically the wetland. And here's a little representation. Graphically, we were trying this out for augmented reality map app that didn't get implemented, but this is a prototype to show the stratigraphy beneath your feet if you're walking through, for example, Occidental Park. And then done different types of, as I mentioned, different types of helping and with other people in different types of collaborations with interpretive signage, trying to get this information of storing the land and water out there in different ways. And I think I'm going to just leave it here for now. And this is a map done by Jeffrey Lynn, not us, but Jeffrey Lynn, who's a project of his that sort of depicts Seattle under, if all the, an extreme case, if all the ice in the world melted and there's a raise of 240 feet of sea level. Thinking about our future and also our dynamic landscape. So I'm going to just stop right there, and thank you. I appreciate, whoops. I'm trying to see how I can stop sharing there.
Thank you so much, Amir. We are reminded that we're working in an urban forest and that means a lot of disruption that's happened. And as much as we have this goal of a healthy, naturalized forest, that we have so many complications, historical and future, that we're working with. I think we'll let Lisa pull back up her computer. Continue here with the presentation. We are going to be moving into our Q&A time. So just as a reminder, if people do have questions, if you could please drop them into the Q&A section. We'll be able to see them and address them with the group. Again, the Q&A section here versus the chat place for questions. And then just really thinking about our call to action. Not only are we leading forest restoration, engaging community, but we're informing, we're galvanizing, we're helping people understand the why of the work, the importance of the work, the greater impact of the work, and we're learning how to think long term, both forward and backward. So just to wrap up here, the Green Seattle Partnership, you know, we've been gifted with this great responsibility of helping to steward these public lands. And it's a huge responsibility with competing interests and approaches, challenges, restraints, a deep historical context for the land use and management. We're also seeing a growing and expanding city. But we may also be seeing a shrinking city too as the climate changes, and with that slide that Amir left us, and just how committed we are to being accountable, an accountable leader within that, to move toward the most sustainable model possible. And not only for our forest, but also for our community, for the residents of our city. We can keep moving forward, or
Would you like me to jump in and cover some of the questions at this point? Yeah.
Great.
Okay. Let's go ahead and do that. Eric, do you want to also join us in case there's some questions that you want to respond to here? Thank you. I think what I'm seeing are questions that are more specific to Green Seattle Partnership, but if there is some questions that folks have for Amir, please feel free to drop them in the question and answer. We can either answer them directly or as chat back to folks that are asking, or we can cover them live here. There's a couple interesting questions here that I wanted to just take a couple minutes as we wrap up to cover. One is from Bryson. He's asking, you know, as we enter into, or as we're in the middle of year 19, heading into year 20, just asking really what should we expect next? What comes next from the partnership? And I actually would be really interested to see folks respond in the chat with ideas that you have. What does your big vision look like if we think about kind of stretching our timeline, getting away from only thinking about kind of that that immediate action, the weeding and the planting. What do you guys imagine for the Green Saddle Partnership's future? I think there's a ton of work to capture what the change has been just in the last 19 years, and to within this next year in our strategic planning process, really to celebrate the work that has happened so far. And there's a lot of work to consider how we have and haven't responded to community. And so I think, you know, some of what comes next is going to continue to be driven by participants with the partnership, and there'll be, you know, even more work to make sure that we're hearing from voices that haven't been involved previously. And again, yeah, kind of, you know, really valuing the commitment that comes out of a 20-year plan and a really solid goal, but looking to really expand some long-term vision of where we're headed. Anybody want to add anything there?
I mean, I would just add that our AP, our superintendent, in being recognized by the UN, I feel like it just really, I'm feeling really optimistic about the future of GSB and the importance of this. You know, it's not this 20-year plan and then we're done. And I just think that I would just say that I feel like, you know, I'm feeling optimistic about the long-term stewardship. It's not just this create these achievements and then walk away. And that's never been the case, but that'd be my comment.
I appreciate that. Since we're, you know, pretty short on time, I did want to jump into another couple questions. There's a second question about how we're considering assisted migration and looking at expanding to include plant offerings like incense cedar and other species that may be adapted to heat and drought conditions like ponderosa pine. And I have a quick answer. One is that we are working through the Northwest Natural Resource Group, has a committee called the Forest Adaptation Network. And they have been working on a set of best management practices for restoration practitioners in our region to consider what assisted migration and looks like within our projects, and to really capture kind of the existing considerations. And so that is in draft form right now. There's a committee that's looking at it, and I really do think it will be a valuable document to share back out. So we'll make a note now to, as it is finalized, probably in the next couple months, to get that out through the monthly mulch to share with folks. You can also learn more about the Forest Adaptation Network and NRG's website, and learn generally about some of their work to promote ecological restoration or ecological forestry that we've been able to learn a lot from as well. There's another question about kind of the role of forest stewards and really the need to kind of expand past like kind of the singular model of forest steward who leads events and leads other people in those events, to be able to bring on more forest stewards that can do work, or bring on a role that can contribute to the program outside of kind of volunteer events. And I think that that's a really valid and important consideration as we move forward programming, that, you know, within the Forest Steward Program, there's actually a really wide variety of people and ways that people contribute, and we've been able to kind of hold that variety within the program. And also there is a constant need for us to continue adapting and to think about what might be the format that best supports folks that are interested in contributing, but, you know, may not be interested in being in that kind of event leadership capacity. So we have been talking about that a lot lately, and especially as part of this on-ramp training series and orientation coming up in the next several months, really just trying to understand what people's interests look like, and then what program format best fits that interest and also best fits our resources and capacity. I think one of the limitations really continues to be that if without a partner organization leading the Forest Steward program alongside Eric, there's definitely a question of like how do we have some efficiencies and have some kind of standardized expectations and program formats that allow us to do it at scale. So we are having those conversations on a regular basis and would definitely welcome new ideas as well. I think it's definitely an important part of improving the program. Wallace has posted in the chat about, the need for succession within the Forest Steward program as well, and that's definitely in that conversation too. So we will be back in touch, especially as part of the strategic planning program, and would encourage folks to reach out and keep having those conversations about what might be a good fit for the work that you're each leading in your parks. I think I'm going to leave it at that. We have one last minute. And I'm going to pass it back to Ashley for some final wrap up.
Thank you. And there are a few more questions there, and we'll try to respond to those in writing. And again, there's just exciting comments, questions about greater collaboration, which is what the partnership is all about. So that's wonderful to see. And we're excited to explore those ideas. We can move forward in a slide. Let's see what else. Yeah, I would love to just leave us here with this as we think about practicing the both and thinking. Asnia lichen is made of two different types of life forms, algae and fungi. We are reminded that seemingly opposing things can coexist. Accepting this can lead to a greater understanding of the whole. Take, for example, urban forest. We have a city full of development, and we have a forest in need of healthy ecosystem. How can we as stewards help build this bridge and build this relationship and see that both can grow and coexist? Take also parks and recreation. We have both green spaces and recreational needs. How can both of these things coexist? The lichen helps defy our assumptions of how nature works. What seems like a parasite can actually help make trees stronger, much like people can actually help make forests healthier. And this is just such an important question here is, again, how can we take all the competing complexities, paradoxes, and leverage them to reach our common values and goals. And then just really a reflection of tonight's teaching is the idea that we all come with a different perspective, we all come with a different knowledge base, and our collective effort is what's really strengthening our program, what is making progress possible. And I wanted to just close out with a quote from an elder who said, "Don't teach all the children exactly the same thing. If you teach them everything all the same, they won't need each other and the world will split apart." So just the reminder that we all need each other in this program and in this work and in this collective effort and this shared understanding as ecology. We're just at the beginning of truly understanding the bigger picture. We want to move forward there. Maybe there's another slide.
We should leave it at that. I think it's
perfect.
Okay. and a great thank you so much, everybody, for being with us this evening and for taking 2 hours. We would have loved to see all your faces and have more engagement. We would encourage you to come to the third annual or the third Forest Steward annual meeting that's scheduled in August. If you want some in-person time, we'll cover exactly the same material with a little bit more time for breaks and socializing, or look for us and each other at the Forest Steward Appreciation event this year as well. So we'll see you all soon. Thank you so much and take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.